The first time I heard the whisper, I thought I was imagining it. It was one of those nights when the house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's pressing in from all sides. My wife, Miranda, was out again, late as usual. I had grown used to her unpredictable schedule, the long hours that seemed to eat away at our time together. But tonight was different. Something in the air felt off. I stood by the window, staring out at the empty street, the city lights flickering like distant stars. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the distant buzz of traffic, but nothing else. I didn't even realize I was listening for something until I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible voice, like a murmur in the dark. It wasn't coming from the house, but from the shadows just beyond the window. "Ethan." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The voice was so faint, so distant, I could have sworn it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But it felt too real to ignore. I shook my head, telling myself it was nothing, that I was just tired. I had been working a lot lately, and stress can mess with your perception. But as I turned away from the window, I heard it again. "Ethan." It was unmistakable now, clear as day. My name, whispered in the darkness. I spun around, my pulse quickening. The house was empty. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I checked the front door. It was locked, as it should be. Miranda wouldn't be back for hours. So who or what had called my name? I walked slowly into the kitchen, my feet dragging across the cold tile floor. The whisper had unsettled me more than I cared to admit. I tried to dismiss it as nothing, just a trick of my mind. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when I noticed the phone. Miranda's phone, lying on the counter. She never left it behind. It was always glued to her hand, whether she was in the kitchen, on the couch, or even in the bathroom. I picked it up, hesitated for a moment, and then unlocked it. Maybe I was being paranoid, but there was something about this night, this strange, eerie stillness, that made me feel like I needed to know what was going on. The screen lit up, and I saw a string of messages from someone named C. The conversations were recent, too recent, and the messages were intimate. They were messages I had never seen before, messages that made my stomach twist into knots. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the messages. They were flirtatious, full of inside jokes and playful remarks. But it wasn't just the messages that unsettled me. It was the tone that suggested something more than just a friendship. There were texts that suggested plans for meeting up, calls made during late nights when I thought she was working late or out with friends. A part of me felt sick just reading them, like I was trespassing into something I wasn't meant to see. But it was too late to stop now. The last message caught my eye. It was sent just a few hours before, and it was simple, but it sent a chill down my spine. "I'll be home soon. I can't wait to see you again tonight." I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling the walls close in around me. The whisper in the dark, the strange silence, and now this, it all added up to something I couldn't deny anymore. My wife, my Miranda, was hiding something from me. Something big. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do. Confront her? Wait until she came home. I wasn't even sure I could look her in the eye after what I had just seen. But one thing was certain. The life I thought I had, the life I thought I understood, was a lie. And now, I had to figure out just how deep this lie went. I had no idea what I was about to uncover, but I knew one thing for sure. I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't unsee. Something that would change everything. I couldn't get those words out of my head. "I can't wait to see you again tonight." The more I thought about it, the worse the feeling in my gut became. Miranda had never once acted like this before. We'd been together for nearly 8 years, and in all that time, she was always open about where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. Sure, she was a bit of a workaholic, and the late nights had become more frequent in the past few months. But this was different. I walked in circles around the house, my mind racing. The house felt foreign, like it wasn't mine anymore. I could almost hear the ticking of every clock, every small sound echoing in the silence. It was as if I was waiting for something, but I didn't know what it was. Was she going to walk through the door and pretend nothing was wrong? Was I just being paranoid? I looked down at the phone again. The message still burned into my mind. I had no idea who C was. I didn't recognize the name, but the intimacy of their conversation made it clear that they weren't just strangers. They were close. Very close. I thought about texting her. But what could I say? "Hey, Miranda, I found your phone, and it looks like you're having an affair." The idea felt absurd, almost impossible. But then again, why was I holding on to this idealized version of our marriage? Hadn't I already seen the cracks beginning to form, slowly but surely, over the last year or more? It had started so small, so insignificant. Miranda working late, canceling plans, talking about being too tired for anything when she came home. I thought it was just the stress of work piling up, the weight of everything on her shoulders. I even convinced myself that I was just being a bad husband, that I wasn't doing enough to support her. But the more I looked at the phone, the more it became clear. This wasn't just stress or a busy schedule. There was something else going on, something bigger, something I couldn't ignore anymore. I knew I had to find out more. I couldn't live with this gnawing uncertainty, the whisper in the dark that wouldn't leave me alone. But where to start? I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of stalking her, but the thought of confronting her without the truth was terrifying. What if I was wrong? What if there was a reasonable explanation for everything? Could I live with the doubt, knowing I had accused her without cause? I made the decision then and there. I would wait. I would watch. I would find out what was really going on, even if it meant making myself a little uncomfortable in the process. I couldn't just let this go. Hours passed, and the clock on the wall seemed to mock me with its slow ticking. Miranda didn't come home. I checked my phone, thinking maybe I had missed a text or a call. Nothing. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there, staring at the empty house. It felt like I was living in some twisted version of my own life. How could everything change so quickly, so drastically? Finally, just after midnight, I heard the front door open. A creak in the wood, the soft shuffle of footsteps in the hallway. Miranda. I was on edge, my heart racing. My pulse thudded in my ears as I heard her enter the house, quietly, as if she were trying not to wake me. I stayed still, listening for her movements. I didn't want to confront her right away, not without more information. I needed to know if she was hiding something. I heard her footsteps stop in the living room, followed by the sound of her setting something down. Then there was silence. I waited. I could feel the tension building, like something was about to break. Then, to my shock, I heard a voice. It wasn't Miranda's. It was a man's voice, low and muffled, but unmistakable. My heart stopped in my chest. "Are you home?" the voice asked. Miranda responded, but her words were quiet, almost inaudible. I could barely make out what she was saying, but it didn't take much to figure out that she was talking to the same person, the one from the phone. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. What was going on? Who was this person? Why was Miranda hiding him from me? I crept toward the living room, careful not to make a sound. My heart thudded in my chest, my fingers trembling. I was close now, so close to getting the answers I had been seeking. I didn't know whether I was ready for what I was about to find out. I peeked around the corner, trying to stay out of sight. Miranda was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hand. But there was no man in the room with her. It didn't make sense. Was she talking to him on the phone? Why was she being so secretive? She looked up suddenly, and for a moment, I thought she saw me. I held my breath, pressing my back against the wall. She didn't seem to notice. Instead, she went quiet, her eyes drifting down to the phone once again. The screen glowed faintly in the dim light of the room, and I could see the words she was typing. I needed to know what she was saying, who she was talking to, but I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. The silence in the room stretched on, suffocating me. The walls seemed to close in, and I realized I was trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The doorbell rang. I froze. It was late, far too late for anyone to be visiting. The sound of the doorbell pierced the silence like a crack of thunder. I stood motionless, my heart racing, my body frozen in place. I hadn't expected anyone. It was after midnight. Miranda hadn't said anything about having company. My thoughts were spinning, each one worse than the last. Who was at the door? Could it be him? The mysterious man whose voice I had heard? I didn't know what to do. Should I go and answer it? Or should I stay hidden and see what would happen next? I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. I still didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And yet, the situation felt like it was spiraling out of control. The doorbell rang again, more urgently this time. Miranda stood up from the couch, her movements sharp and hurried, almost like she was caught off guard. She quickly looked toward the hallway, then back at her phone as if considering something. I could see her fingers trembling as she typed a quick response, her face tense. Then, without saying a word, she moved toward the door. My mind was racing. I knew I had to find out who was on the other side of that door. I didn't want to make any noise, didn't want her to know I was awake, but my curiosity got the best of me. I slowly stepped out of the hallway and crouched low, just enough to peek around the corner and catch a glimpse of what was happening. She opened the door, and standing there, in the doorway, was a tall man. He was wearing a leather jacket, his face partially obscured by the shadows, but the moment he stepped into the light, I recognized him. It was Jason, a guy I had never met, but whose name had come up several times. Miranda had mentioned him in passing a few months ago, just a friend from work, she had said. But there was something in her voice that felt off, almost defensive, when she talked about him. I could hear them speaking softly, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. They were too far from me, and the voices were low. My chest tightened as I watched them interact. Miranda was standing a little too close to him, her body angled toward him as if they were in some kind of private conversation. They weren't just friends. I could tell that much. There was an intimacy between them, an ease in their movements that felt wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. What was going on? Was this the person she had been texting? Was this the C from the messages I had found on her phone earlier? I needed to know, but I was terrified of the answer. They spoke for another minute, and then Jason said something that made Miranda laugh softly. The sound sent a shiver down my spine. There was something so familiar about the way they interacted, something so casual, yet so intimate, that I felt like I was intruding on something I wasn't meant to see. After a brief moment, Jason stepped back, as if preparing to leave. Miranda's eyes flickered toward the ground before she reached out, gently touching his arm. "I'll see you soon," she said, her voice low and almost playful. I felt like the floor had just dropped out beneath me. She didn't even seem to notice that she was standing right there with another man, touching him in a way that was far beyond casual. It wasn't just a friendly touch. It was something else. Jason gave her a small smile, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night without a word. Miranda closed the door softly behind him, her movements slow, as though she were reluctant to leave the moment behind. I stood there, frozen in place, every muscle in my body tense. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. My mind was reeling. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't the woman I had known. This wasn't the wife I thought I had married. Miranda walked back into the living room, the quiet click of her heels on the floor echoing in the otherwise silent house. I didn't know what to do next. I had seen enough, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront her. I still didn't have all the answers. I couldn't just accuse her without knowing for sure. But one thing was clear, something had changed. Something had been hidden from me, and I was done being in the dark. I had to find out more. I had to know everything, no matter how much it hurt. But where to start? What should I do now? I couldn't let this go, not after what I had just witnessed. I made up my mind. Tomorrow, I would confront her. I couldn't keep living like this, on the edge of uncertainty, waiting for the truth to hit me in pieces. It was time to face it head on, whatever it was. The silence of the night felt suffocating now. The walls, once comforting, felt like they were closing in on me. I had no idea how much deeper this would go, or where it would lead me, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to just stand by anymore. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter what it cost me. But what if the truth was more than I could handle? The next morning came like a slow-moving storm. I barely slept, tossing and turning, my mind a constant whirl of images and emotions. The sound of Miranda's soft breathing next to me was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I wanted to confront her. I needed to, but something held me back. Was I ready to face the truth? What if she denied everything? What if I was misinterpreting the situation? I had already seen so much, but what if there was more? I spent the morning pacing, lost in thought, as Miranda went about her usual routine. She didn't seem any different. No sign of the guilty tension I had expected. She got ready for work, talking to me as though nothing had changed. We exchanged small talk, nothing out of the ordinary. She kissed me on the cheek as she left, telling me to have a good day, just like she always did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was a lie. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I knew it was time. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I had to know the truth, all of it, even if it tore me apart. The lies, the whispers, the secrets, none of it made sense anymore. I wasn't just going to sit here, pretending that everything was fine while my life fell apart. I went straight to her desk, where she kept her things, her notebooks, her work bag. There was a sense of betrayal that gnawed at me as I rifled through her belongings. But I was desperate. I needed something that would give me more insight into what was going on behind closed doors. As I sifted through papers and receipts, I found something I wasn't expecting, a ticket. It was for a hotel, a reservation at a place I recognized, one that wasn't even in the city we lived in. I stared at the ticket, my heart racing. This wasn't just some innocent trip. This was a getaway, and it wasn't with me. The date on the ticket was just a few days away. She hadn't mentioned any business trips, no late meetings, no special plans. Yet, there it was, a confirmation for a hotel stay. My hands were shaking as I traced the words on the paper. There was a note attached, a handwritten one in Miranda's elegant script. It was short, but it chilled me to the bone. Can't wait to see you again. I'll be there at 7 p.m. sharp. I felt the blood drain from my face as the pieces fell into place. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the private conversations. I had tried to deny it, to tell myself I was just being paranoid. But this was undeniable. There was no more room for doubt. She was having an affair. But with who? Who was the man behind the messages? The one whose name I didn't know, but whose presence was so tangible in our home, in her life? Was it Jason, the man I had seen the night before? Or was there someone else, someone I hadn't even considered? I felt like I was suffocating. My thoughts were racing, trying to process everything. The last 8 years, the memories, the love I thought we had. It was all unraveling before me, like a carefully constructed facade crumbling to dust. I didn't know what to do with this information. Confront her? I couldn't even imagine facing her with this ticket in my hand, with the undeniable proof that she had been lying to me. I was already reeling from the betrayal, but what if there was more? What if I wasn't ready to hear the truth? I couldn't sit here any longer, pretending that everything was normal. I had to act. I grabbed the ticket and slid it into my pocket, resolving to follow her. I needed to see this through, to see where she was going, to find out who this man really was. The thought of confronting her now, when I wasn't sure of all the details, made my stomach turn. But maybe if I followed her, I could get the answers I was looking for. Maybe I could finally uncover the full truth. The hours dragged on, the anticipation building with each passing minute. I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, but nothing could shake the sense of impending confrontation that hung in the air. Finally, it was time. I followed her car, keeping a safe distance. I felt like I was living someone else's life, watching my own story unfold from the sidelines. The drive felt endless, each mile stretching out, making the weight of my thoughts heavier. Miranda's route was familiar, the one she took to work every day, but this time, she took a detour. I couldn't shake the sense that something was horribly wrong. She drove further than usual, heading out of the city, toward the outskirts. My pulse quickened as I recognized the direction she was going. It was toward the hotel listed on the ticket. I was right. I parked down the street, far enough away to avoid being seen, but close enough to watch her. The hotel loomed ahead, an innocuous building on the edge of town, but to me, it felt like the center of my world. Miranda parked her car, checked her phone quickly, and walked inside, looking around nervously before disappearing through the door. I waited in the car for what felt like an eternity, trying to calm myself, to keep my emotions in check. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading, but now that it was happening, I felt like I was in freefall. What would I do once I had the truth? What was left after that? I watched the clock tick past the minutes, my mind a whirlwind of doubt and anger. But I couldn't turn back now. I had come too far. I had to know what was going on, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew. And then, an hour later, the doors of the hotel opened again. I had been sitting in the car for over an hour, watching the hotel entrance with a growing sense of dread. My mind was in overdrive, replaying every interaction I'd had with Miranda, trying to piece together what I thought I knew and what I was still missing. The more I thought about it, the less I understood. It felt like everything had been a lie, every moment we'd shared, every plan we'd made, built on a foundation that was now crumbling before my eyes. I sat there in the darkness, the hum of the engine the only sound in the stillness of the night. The hotel was quiet, save for the occasional car pulling up or leaving and the occasional pedestrian walking by. I knew I should have been moving, that I should have been figuring out my next step, but I couldn't bring myself to do anything. The weight of what I was about to confront, the reality that Miranda, the woman I had trusted, was hiding something from me. Something this big was too much to process. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the doors to the hotel opened. My heart stopped. For a moment, I didn't know what I was seeing. A figure emerged from the hotel, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He didn't look like anyone I recognized, and yet, I felt an unsettling certainty in my gut. This was him. This was the man she had been seeing behind my back. This was the one who had sent her the messages, the one who had whispered her name in the dark. He was walking toward the parking lot, his steps quick and purposeful, like he knew exactly where he was going. But it was the way Miranda had been acting earlier that night. Her nervousness, the way she'd looked at her phone, the touch she had shared with him, that had given me this sinking feeling in my stomach. I wasn't ready for this, not for this man to be standing in front of me, but I had no choice. The truth was unfolding before me, and I had to face it. I had to know who he was. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The air felt thick, the reality of the situation setting in. The door of the hotel slid open again, and this time, I saw Miranda. She walked out slowly, her head down, her pace hesitant. She didn't notice the man waiting for her in the parking lot. I watched as he approached her, and what happened next shook me to my core. He reached out and gently pulled her toward him, his hand resting on her waist. Miranda didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her face lighting up in a smile that I hadn't seen in months. They stood there, close, too close, and for a long moment, the world around me seemed to disappear. It was like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. My breath caught in my throat as they kissed. It was slow and tender, the kind of kiss I had only ever shared with her in the early days of our relationship, the kind of kiss that told you everything you needed to know about how someone felt. But that kiss wasn't for me. It wasn't for the man she had promised to love, to grow old with. It was for him, the man who had been texting her, calling her, and now, holding her in a way that I had never been held. A wave of nausea hit me like a punch to the gut. The bitterness, the humiliation, it was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to confront them both right there, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, watching my marriage unravel in front of my eyes. They pulled apart after a few moments, and Miranda gave him a small, almost shy smile. He said something I couldn't hear, and she nodded, looking down at the ground before walking toward her car. He followed her, still close, still talking to her in low murmurs. As they approached her car, I realized that the situation was far worse than I had imagined. I thought I was just going to uncover an affair. But this felt like something deeper, something that I wasn't prepared for. I watched them drive off together. My mind was spinning, trying to catch up with what I had just seen. Was this what had been happening behind closed doors? Had I really been that blind, that unaware? My body felt heavy with the weight of the knowledge I had just gained. I had been so focused on finding the truth that I hadn't realized how much it would hurt to uncover it. My marriage, my life with Miranda, was no longer what I thought it was. It was a lie, and I had just witnessed the evidence. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to follow them, to see where they were going, to confront her and demand answers right then and there. But another part of me, the part that was still trying to hold on to some semblance of dignity, told me to walk away, to let them have their moment. I didn't know how to process this, so I stayed in the car, paralyzed by the overwhelming emotions swirling inside me. Anger, betrayal, confusion, fear. I had seen the truth, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an ending to everything I thought I knew, to everything I had worked so hard to build. And now, all that was left was to figure out what to do with the shattered pieces. I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't go back to the way things were. My heart was broken, but I was still standing. The only question now was, what would I do next? And how would I handle the aftermath of the truth I had uncovered? I sat in the car for what seemed like an eternity, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every breath I took felt heavy, suffocating. I had just witnessed something that broke me in a way I didn't know was possible. I thought I knew Miranda. I thought I knew our marriage. But now, everything I had believed in was a lie. The man she had kissed wasn't just some fling. He was something more. He was someone she had clearly chosen, someone who had taken my place, and I had watched them together. That kiss, that touch, those were moments that belonged to me, or so I had thought. But now, I was standing on the precipice of something I couldn't undo. I had seen too much. I had felt too much. There was no going back from this. The truth was out, and it was ugly. I knew I had to confront her, but a voice in my head told me to wait, to gather myself before I did anything reckless. As I sat there, contemplating what to do next, I realized that I wasn't just angry. I was devastated. There was a rawness to the pain, something I hadn't expected. Anger was easy. Rage was something I could handle. But this, it felt like a quiet storm, a slow burn that would consume everything in its path if I wasn't careful. I watched Miranda's car disappear down the street. She was gone now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was slipping further away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I could confront her, demand the truth, but how could I even begin to ask the questions that had been haunting me? How could I look her in the eyes when I knew she had been lying to me, betraying me in ways I hadn't even imagined? The decision to confront her was inevitable, but how? How could I stand there, asking her to explain herself, when I already knew the answer? I drove home in a daze, the world outside the car window blurring into a stream of colors. I wasn't even sure how I got there. Everything felt like a dream, a terrible, twisted dream I couldn't wake up from. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, the engine running, the faint hum of the air conditioning filling the car. When I finally stepped out of the car, I felt like a man walking toward his own execution. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know how I would look at her. But one thing was certain, I had to face her. The house was quiet when I walked inside. Too quiet. There were no sounds of laughter or conversation, no footsteps or music playing. Just silence, thick and suffocating. I walked into the kitchen, where I found a note from Miranda. It was short, but the words jumped off the page. "I'll be home late tonight. Don't wait up." My chest tightened. It was the kind of note she left on days when she was exhausted or busy. But now, seeing those words, knowing what I knew, they felt like a final goodbye. It was as if she were giving me permission to let go, to stop caring. I took the note and crumpled it in my hand. My fingers shook as I tossed it into the trash, feeling the weight of her absence settle over me. It was like she had already left, even before I had confronted her. I had to confront her, and I had to do it now. There was no more waiting, no more hiding from the truth. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space across from me. My mind kept flashing back to the images of Miranda and that man. Kissing, touching, laughing like I wasn't even there. I thought I knew her better than anyone, but I was wrong. I didn't know her at all. I waited for what felt like hours, my thoughts a swirling storm of anger and confusion. The clock on the wall ticked away the time, the sound growing louder with every passing second. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, the door opened. I stood up immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. Miranda walked in, her face flushed, her eyes darting nervously around the room. The moment she saw me, she froze. There was a moment of recognition, like she knew that everything was about to change. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't know where to begin. I couldn't look at her the way I used to. Not with everything that had happened. Not after seeing what I had seen. She cleared her throat, stepping further into the room. "Ethan, you're home early," she said, trying to sound casual, but there was an edge to her voice I had never heard before. I looked at her, trying to steady my breathing. "I know about him, Miranda." Her face paled. Her eyes widened in shock, but she didn't say anything right away. The silence between us felt suffocating, like a storm that had been building for years and was finally about to break. "I know about the hotel, about the messages, about everything," I continued, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she just stood there, her eyes avoiding mine, her face a mask of guilt and fear. "I've seen it all. I saw you with him," I said, my voice growing colder. "I saw you kiss him. I saw you leave with him." Miranda's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't answer. She just stood there, her hands trembling at her sides, as though she had no idea how to respond to the truth that was laid bare in front of her. "Who is he, Miranda?" I asked, my voice low and strained. "Who is he to you?" She took a deep breath, and for a long moment, she just stared at me. It felt like the weight of everything. The years, the memories, the trust that had been shattered, hung in the air between us. Finally, she spoke. "His name is Jack," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He's someone I met a few months ago, and I didn't know how to tell you." I didn't know how to stop. My heart shattered. I had been right all along. She had been seeing him behind my back, and I had been the fool, blind to the truth. The man who had kissed her, who had taken her away from me. He was Jack. And he wasn't just a friend. He was everything I wasn't. I took a step back, feeling the ground beneath me shift, the world spinning in a way I couldn't control. I had been betrayed in the most intimate way possible, and now, I was left standing here, trying to figure out how to move forward. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice trembling. Since last summer, she said, her words like daggers. I never meant for it to happen, but it did. And I didn't know how to stop. Her confession hung in the air, the weight of her words suffocating me. Everything I had believed in, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, it was all gone. And the person who had shattered it all was standing in front of me, pleading for forgiveness. But what could I say? What could I possibly say to someone who had betrayed me in the worst way possible? I stood there, in the middle of the room, feeling the weight of her words crash over me like a tidal wave. Every ounce of my body screamed at me to leave, to walk out the door, to never look back. But something held me there, something deeper than the rage, deeper than the pain. A small, flickering ember of hope, buried somewhere in the mess of my heart, still clung to the idea of saving whatever was left of us. Miranda's eyes were wide now, her face flushed with shame, but it wasn't just shame. There was fear too. Fear that I would walk away, that I would leave her to face the consequences of her actions alone. She took a step toward me, her voice trembling, but I couldn't move. I couldn't even look at her without seeing the image of her and Jack, their kiss, their closeness, playing in my mind like an endless loop. I didn't mean for it to happen, Ethan, she said, her voice breaking. I was so lost. You were always busy. You were always tired. I thought. She paused, searching for the right words. I thought if I could just find someone who made me feel seen, someone who cared about me the way I needed to be cared about, maybe things would feel different. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. The pain in her eyes was unmistakable, but the hurt I felt was sharper, cutting deeper than anything she could ever say. It wasn't just the fact that she'd betrayed me. It was the realization that she had been unhappy for so long and hadn't even had the courage to tell me. I had been living in a shell of a relationship, thinking everything was fine when all along, she had been breaking apart inside. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks, and for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't justifying her actions. She was explaining them. She was giving me the reasons why she turned to someone else, and in some twisted way, it made sense. But that didn't make it right. Nothing could ever make it right. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. You think I didn't care about you? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. You think I didn't notice how distant you were? How you were pushing me away? I tried, Miranda. I tried so hard. I spent every day, every hour, working for us. For you, for our daughter. And you were out there with him. With Jack. Her face crumpled, her eyes filling with tears. Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make things right again. I looked at her, my heart breaking even more with every word that came from her mouth. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness. She was pleading for it, desperate for something that neither of us could get back. The life we had, the connection we once shared, was gone. It had been shattered beyond repair, and no amount of words could ever fix that. I turned away from her, pacing the room in tight, jerky steps. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more painful than the last. How had we come to this? How had I not seen the signs? How had I missed everything that had been happening right under my nose? I wanted to scream, to throw things, to let my anger out. But it wasn't just anger anymore. It was confusion, betrayal, and an unbearable ache in my chest that I didn't know how to deal with. Why, Miranda? I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy? I would have listened. I would have done anything to fix this. To fix us. She was silent for a moment, staring at the ground, her hands wringing together in a nervous, frantic motion. When she finally looked up, her eyes were filled with regret. I thought I could handle it on my own, she admitted. I thought that I could fix it without involving you, that I could deal with everything without burdening you. But I was wrong. And now I've ruined everything. I've ruined us. Her words were like poison in my veins. I felt myself pulling further away, closing off parts of myself I hadn't even realized were still open. The more she spoke, the less I wanted to hear. The less I wanted to believe the person standing in front of me was the woman I had loved for so long. Maybe that's the problem, Miranda, I said quietly. You thought you could fix everything on your own. But you didn't. And now we're here. You didn't talk to me. You didn't share your pain with me. Instead, you ran to him. She gasped, a sharp breath escaping her as if I had struck her. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I don't know how to make this right. I don't know. I turned away from her, the weight of her words crushing me. I don't know if I can forgive you, Miranda. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. The words tasted bitter as they left my mouth, but they were the truth. I wasn't sure I could ever come back from this. I wasn't sure we could ever go back to what we were. There was a long silence between us, the kind of silence that felt like it stretched on forever. Neither of us spoke for a long time, as though neither of us could find the words to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice small and tentative. What do we do now? I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't know what we did now. I didn't know what I did now. This had been my life, my world, for years, and now it was falling apart. The woman I had loved, the life I had built, everything was shattered in front of me, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. I don't know. I replied, my voice cracking with the weight of everything I had just learned. But I need time. I need space. To figure out what's next. For me. For us. She nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to see her like this, but I couldn't look away. She was lost, just as much as I was. But I wasn't sure if there was anything left for us to salvage. In that moment, I knew that our marriage, the life we had known, was over. And whatever came next, whatever we chose to do, it wouldn't be the same. Days passed in a blur. The house felt different. Empty. Each room I walked through seemed foreign, like a reminder of a life that had slipped through my fingers. Miranda and I barely spoke. We shared the same space, but it felt like we were miles apart, each lost in our own world of grief, guilt, and confusion. It wasn't just the betrayal that had broken me. It was the realization that everything I thought I knew about our life was a lie. I had loved her with all my heart, and now I wasn't sure if she was the woman I had married. I wasn't sure if I even knew myself anymore. Miranda, too, seemed lost. She cried often, and I could hear her muffled sobs in the dead of night, the weight of her remorse heavy in the air between us. She wanted to fix things. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she tried to talk to me, tried to explain. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. At least, not right away. I spent a lot of time walking around the neighborhood, trying to clear my head, trying to make sense of everything. I needed space to think, to heal, to figure out who I was without her. I had never realized how much I had given up of myself in our marriage, how much I had put aside for the sake of keeping the peace. Now, I had to rebuild. But something began to change over the next week. Miranda started to give me the space I needed. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, not yet. But she was patient. She started taking small steps to show me that she was truly sorry, that she wanted to make amends. It wasn't grand gestures or empty promises. It was simple things. She took care of the house, cooking meals, doing things that needed to be done without me asking. She sat quietly with me in the evenings, not speaking, but just being there. It was in the quiet moments that I began to see a flicker of the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who had been buried under the weight of life, under the pressures we had both ignored. One afternoon, a week after that fateful confrontation, she came to me with something in her hands, a small, worn notebook. It was mine. I hadn't seen it in years. You used to write in this when we first met, she said softly. I think you stopped because of everything going on. But I remember how it used to help you. I thought, maybe it could help you again. I took the notebook from her, surprised. There was a softness in her voice, a genuine desire to heal, and it touched me in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time, I felt like she was reaching out to me, not just apologizing, but showing me that she understood what I needed. I don't know if we can fix everything, I said quietly, still unsure of what was possible. But I know I need to figure out who I am, where I'm going from here. Miranda nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. And I'll be here, whatever you decide. I want you to be happy. I want to find a way to make this right. Her words were simple, but they meant everything. It wasn't about her trying to convince me to stay or fix everything at once. It was about her accepting that I needed time, that I needed to find my own path before we could even think about what came next. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to rebuild my own life. I took small steps toward healing, rediscovering things I had forgotten about myself. I spent time with my daughter, rediscovered old hobbies, and started talking to friends again. I began to understand that, even though our marriage was shattered, I wasn't defined by the betrayal. I was still Ethan, and that was something I had almost lost sight of in all the chaos. Miranda and I began to talk more, honestly and openly. We didn't have all the answers, but we were learning how to communicate again. We were both doing the hard work of rebuilding trust, not in each other yet, but in ourselves. It was slow, sometimes painful, but it was progress. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether we could ever truly be happy together again. But there was also something else, something I hadn't expected to find: hope. Hope that, with time, we could heal. One afternoon, a few months later, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, watching Miranda laugh as she played with Lily. It was a soft, genuine laugh, one that I hadn't heard in a long time. My heart swelled in my chest, and for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of peace. We weren't perfect, and we hadn't fixed everything, but we had found a way forward. "Ethan," Miranda said, turning to me, "I know we've both been through a lot, but I just wanted to thank you for giving us a chance. For giving me a chance to prove that I can be the person you need." I smiled at her, my heart full of emotion. "Thank you for showing me that you're still here, that we're still here, even after everything. We'll figure this out together, one step at a time." And for the first time in months, I believed it. There was no magic fix, no easy solution to the pain we had gone through. But as I sat there, watching the woman I loved and the daughter I cherished, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us after all. We had both made mistakes, but we were learning, growing, and healing one day at a time. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were willing to walk it together. And that, in itself, was enough to give me the strength to believe in a future where we could find happiness again.